Good morning. Welcome to today's Welcoming Environment Conversation Circle, the Latinx Perspective. I am the Vice Chair of the Welcoming Environment Committee, Marilyn K. Render. Please note today's session, we have a host of wonderful panelists that are going to be joining us today. If you have any questions during the session, please direct those in the chat feature to the panelists. I'd like to introduce to you our panelists today. Carlos Candinas has been involved in leadership roles for over 20 years. He is currently serving as the Director of Information Technology for the National Certification and Recertification for Nurse Anesthetics. In his present position, Carlos helps define organization strategic objectives and oversees information system security and infrastructure. Jay Carino has been in the association industry for over 15 years and is currently VP of Member Services at ANFP. He oversees leadership development for members, including nomination process, training, board committee volunteer recruitment efforts. Our next panelist is Norma Castrejon. Norma has over 9 years of technology leadership in associations. She is currently the Association Director of Technology at the Higher Learning Commission, where she is responsible for coordinating complex technology systems, facilitating development and maintenance of internal and external facing applications, and directing IT projects to meet business objectives, operational goals, and key business priorities. Josie Hernandez, IOM, is a dietetic practice group manager for the Academy of Nutrition, Dietetics. In this role, Josie serves as DPG manager for the Oncology Nutrition, Public Health and Community Nutrition, and Nutrition Informatics practice groups. And our last panelist is Jose Segura. Jose is the Executive Director of DONA International and the Telecommunications Risk Management Association. He manages all perspectives of the association's governance, strategy, and operations. Jose joined Bostrom in January 2019. He began his nonprofit career in 2000 and has been serving associations ever since. Welcome to all our panelists today. I'd like to turn the session over to Norma to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know that by no means do we speak for all Latinos and Latinas. The goal today is to open up a lens into some of our views regarding the recent welcoming environment research. But before we even dive into that, we wanted to dive a little bit into the definitions of Hispanic, Latino, or Latinx. As you know, you've probably heard these terms and they get used interchangeably. In August, NPR had an article called Hispanic, Latino, or Latinx Survey Says. And what this article really focused and said was that the majority of Latinos surveyed self-identified as Hispanic. And out of the ones that were surveyed, 76% had not even heard of the term Latinx. The 24% that had heard of it, only 3% actually self-identified themselves as Latinx. And at the end of the day, when you ask someone where they're from, people prefer to identify themselves based on their country of origin. So to give us a little bit more of a definition on these pan-ethnic labels, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jose so he can share with the group and also give us our thoughts on these labels. Jose?
Thank you, Norma. Yes, so as we were preparing for this, one of the things that I was recollecting was that growing up during geography class, I grew up in Puerto Rico, by the way, I received a whole class about these terms and what they meant, not Latinx because that wasn't in use then, but the whole idea meaning that Hispanics comes as an origin of a Latin word that the Romans, how the Romans used to refer to the Spanish portion of the Iberian Peninsula. So if you were from Spain now, you were called Hispanico. And then that obviously evolved into Hispanic, and now everyone that speaks Spanish from Mexico all the way to Argentina, that being the term, you're Hispanic because you're originally, your language comes from Spanish. So obviously, you know, Brazil is not doesn't fall under that definition. And at least the French or other speaking languages or countries of those speaking languages are not considered under Hispanic. However, Latino is anyone that speaks a language from a Latin origin. So French, Spanish, Portuguese, those languages do fall under that. So the idea being that anyone from, again, Mexico to Argentina that falls under that definition is a Latino. So under those two definitions, I can be either called a Latino or a Hispanic. It doesn't bother me. I know people have preferences, but you can call me either one. And then the latest one is being Latinx. Latinx is a newer term. About 20 years ago was when it originated. And basically, it was because in the US, we wanted to make it a little bit more of a welcoming environment for those folks that are not binary in terms on gender identity. So in Spanish, in case you don't know, everything has a gender. Either if you're a Latina, it's female, Latino is male. So there wasn't an area where non-binary folks could actually, you know, identify themselves. Same with Hispanic. In English, it doesn't have a gender, but in Spanish, it does. So that was how Latinx, the term Latinx, came to be. So I hope that clears things up. I know people have preferences, so I encourage you to search for those definitions. Just a quick Google will bring up some of those terms.
So Jose, you're saying that the Latinx was created just to be gender neutral and be more inclusive?
Yes, that is correct. So specifically in the LGBTQ plus community.
Okay, cool. Well, I personally have never used the term Latinx to self-identify. It is a newer term that I don't personally identify with. I guess I fall into the 20% category of individuals that have heard Latinx but do not use it. I tend to identify myself as Hispanic or Latino, and I use both terms interchangeably in all types of settings. However, when I'm in a setting where there are other Latino and Hispanics, I tend to further identify myself as Puerto Rican to provide further distinction amongst all the variable groups and countries of origin that make up the Latino Hispanic community.
Thanks, Jose and Jay, for your thoughts on that. I think we all have similar thoughts in regards to that. You know, I feel the same way. You know, if someone asks me what I am, you know, in a formal setting, I'll say Latina. If someone says I'm Hispanic, that's fine. I don't get offended. But if I am talking to this group, I'll say I'm Mexican, right? My family is from Mexico. But in regards to the Latinx term, what I found that the article said was that those that did identify, which was a small percentage, 3%, were for the ages of 18 to 29. And that made me think of, I have 2 teenage girls. And they are very fluid in their terms of gender neutral terms. And they've educated me on when to use they, them, he, him, she, her, and that is very natural for them. So I think that the term in the last 5 years has gained momentum, and it's probably going to continue to gain momentum as that next generation gets older and really talks about trying to be a fully welcoming environment. And And in that case, I think it's also important for organizations to know that and to be, because ultimately you may be responsible to have, your membership adapt to that new terminology. So moving on, we're going to shift gears now and get our panel's thoughts and reactions to Forum Magazine's cover story in the current edition. It's called Fueling the Journey. And what this article is about is it talks about how Association Forum embarked on a groundbreaking study with McKinley advisors to conduct research to understand the current state of DE&I efforts in the association sector. I know McKinley advisors had done some initial research, but it wasn't within the nonprofit association sector. The study invited 12 co-sponsoring organizations to survey either their members, their staff, or both. And then the results were compiled and presented in the spring of 2020. The results of the survey really were broken down into 4 key questions for exploration. And that's exactly what we're going to focus on today. The first one is, are associations representative of their industry or sector? The second is, what are the perceptions of association members and staff about how well the association is doing in terms of DE&I? The third being, what challenges are associations facing in implementing action-oriented tactics to foster DE&I? And the last one is, what DE&I topics, areas, or initiatives are most important to association members and their staff? We've invited the panels to share their reactions to the study in relation to both their professional experiences in association management, working with their respective organizations, as well as their personal experiences as association professionals building their careers. So let's go ahead and get started with that first question. Are associations representative of their industry or sector? What the study found was that only 40% of association staff and 44% of members responded yes to this question, which led to a further question. Why do more than half of association staff and association members not think that their association is representative of their industry or sector in relation to DE&I? Some of the findings pointed to a lack of racial and ethnic diversity. Other reasons included lack of gender diversity and lack of diversity in leadership. Josie, I'm going to turn it over to you to get some initial thoughts on that.
Thank you, Norma. So the research showed that there is actually very little data right now to serve as a benchmark. And I think I can even give an example. When this panel had the opportunity to have this discussion, I think most of us immediately thought to where are Latinos within the association management sector? Where do we fall in? Where do organizations that have are maybe perhaps Latino focused or have a large base of Latino employees, where do they fall in as member organizations? And there is very little data. It's hard to find that data specific to association management. So this is basically what the study revealed as well. So I think the story here is that lack of data from the 12 co-sponsoring organizations that participated in the study. So then I think, it's very important to have a benchmark to measure what progress you're going to make and in what area you want to make that progress. So I think this is a great opportunity for everyone to kind of check in with their organization and ask, are they picking up this data? Are they asking their members for this data? So the study found that very few organizations are doing that right now, collecting data in terms of their gender, their racial, ethnic identity, and other things like that. So the ones that do have data have just recently started to collect it. And then the ones that are starting to collect it are also finding some hesitation from the membership. So a couple of things to note here is, is your organization currently collecting the data? And if they are, how are we using it? Does it serve as a benchmark? Is the data present in decision-making and strategic planning to give you leverage to move those initiatives forward? So I think there's a question that right now everyone can kind of take a break, look back and ask, especially due to all of the social justice movement that has happened, due to what we have going on in our culture and our society right now. Many organizations, I know my organization in particular, has really heard from their membership, really pushing this forward. So again, the question there is, do we have the data? We need to collect it, and how are we using it? Last thing I want to touch on is what can we as individuals do in our organizations, depending on where you are in your organization, what your role is, if you have the ability to impact strategic planning, or if you are more on the delivery of the work. There are always ways in which you can play a role in sharing your life experience and identifying diversity in the work that you do. If you work in education, it's a simple thing as what you are featuring in your materials. The faces, are they reflective of your sector? Do they show representation, someone that different people can identify with? So I think there are always ways that you can look at it, and that's the key is having this data in the forefront.
Great, thank you for that, Josie. I personally believe that some of the many reasons that associations are not representatives of their industry or sector in relation to DE&I is because they're not being intentional with their actions, their practices, and the policies to be inclusive and transparent across the board. Many associations begin the process to address DE&I issues, but they tend to lose momentum and progress, and the progress withers away as they encounter the difficulties and the uncomfortableness that comes with the hard work of developing and implementing DE&I initiatives and programs. Honestly, we all know that DE&I is very hard work, and it requires continuous dedication to keep the momentum and the progress going forward. It is not a said and done type of initiative. The work requires a lot of time to gather data, as we've learned already, analyze, develop, implement, but as well as assessing and reevaluating everything that has been done. Many organizations just hit the tip of the iceberg in addressing some of the items such as gender, the country of origin, age, color, religion, sexual orientation, physical abilities, etc. The work, it also has its ebbs and flows with processes and initiatives that are always evolving and changing as progress continues to develop. We, association professionals, need to be intentional, committed to the importance of such work, and be ready to encounter the challenges and the hard realities that are in front of us. We all need to be strong-willed and persevere what is yet to come, because it's not going to be an easy task, but it's very much needed.
Thank you. Thank you, Josie and Jay, for that. It is important that, organizations recognize that some of that data that is being collected, it's not, or it is, or it's going to start, but it's going to be a long-term thing, because I think in many cases, you'll see that when you start collecting data, not everyone doesn't respond right away. So it's going to be a long process before you actually get a good amount of data regarding that information. Okay, so we'll move on to that, the second question in the study, which is what are the perceptions of association members and staff about how well the association is doing in terms of DE&I? And the responses to that question followed a bell curve for both members and staff. So very few members said, very few, which was like 4%, said called their associations not at all successful. Then the numbers fell again at very successful and extremely successful. And then there was that middle ground of moderately successful, which was 31%. To get reactions on that data, I'm going to turn it over to Carlos to get his thoughts on that.
Thanks, Norma. To me, when I read this question, the perception is relative, right? And so what are these folks who answered the survey, what are they comparing themselves to? Who are they comparing themselves to? When you talk to most folks and you engage them and you try to ascertain what DE&I really stands for, most of them say gender or race. We don't think about disability. We don't think about diversity of thought. So those are just the two pillars that most folks think about. But again, what are you comparing yourself to? Is there a standard model? Is there a baseline model? I don't think so. And so you kind of just look at yourself, you look at your own organization and say, and your association and say, well, how are we doing? Am I, are Latinos representative in the association that I'm a member of? It could be on a local scale, which could be association forum. It could be on a national scale with ASAE. Again, I think the numbers show, if you look at the infographics attached to that research, only 1% of Latinos are members for association forum. So that kind of begs the question, is there not, are they not seeing a value in membership? Are we not doing enough to get the word out, to reach these folks, to make sure that there is inclusivity? So just some things to think about in terms of the overall perspective. I can tie it back to my own organization. We're not a membership organization. We don't have members. We're a credentialing organization. But of the approximate 53,000, and this is a couple years back, around 2% or 1,060 were actually certified registered nurse anesthetists. And that aligns closely with the survey data. And so I don't know if there is a percentage that we're looking to reach, but again, I think we need to look at particular, smaller milestones to be able to get there. From a staff perspective, again, I can speak to my own organization. I think our organization does a phenomenal job in terms of having a diverse staff, and they've been making strides in terms of the board of directors as well. So as a staff member, we're always looking at our leadership to see, well, what's coming next? What initiatives are you rolling out? The only thing I think we could do a better job at is engaging the staff on some of those high level decisions that are being made in terms of diversity. These are important things. And I think in order to gain more momentum and traction, you've got to involve your staff at all levels. And then also you need to be able to put your ear towards your members or certificants to hear the same type of thing. If we think about D&I committees from Association Forum or even ASAE, is there enough outreach being done to speak to Latinos in general? I don't know. I'm not sure if I have enough experience to answer that question, but from what I've seen, kind of universally, we've got some work to do. Thanks, Norma.
If I could just add a few things to that, I totally agree. And I think, going back to some of the things that Carlos just mentioned, there's 1% of Association Forum is composed of, the membership is composed of Hispanics. And one thing to note there is that Chicago, as of 2016, the largest minority are Hispanics. So I know that there are some roadblocks and obstacles in us getting outreach in terms of recruitment for our own associations, recruitment for our membership, and making sure that those are targeted to different areas to make sure that we do engage different point of views, different minorities, make sure that we are inclusive. But, what else can we do about that? I saw somebody on the chat that mentioned the Gdpr and data security in order to collect that information. So yes, that is a hurdle that we have to, go through and make sure that we have the data, that we have a good business case for it. Maybe we don't tie it specifically to member data and we do a blank survey that doesn't tie it back, but it just gives us an assessment about where we are so that we can benchmark against ourselves and then put measures specifically to include those minorities that are maybe underrepresented. And I'm not an expert in GDPR, so check with your folks before you do that. But I think it's something that is needed as well. So one other thing is, this whole thing about the reaching out to minorities and making sure that we do a better job at including them. I have worked in multiple associations, large and small, and there always have been Hispanics in all of them. I don't know if there were members of Association Forum or not. And honestly, I didn't do a good job at saying, hey, do you know about Association Forum? Do you know that there are these resources available that Association Forum puts out there, and that you can actually go and get tapped into so that you can advance your career? I think we need to do a better job ourselves as Hispanics, and anyone that is in a position of leadership to do that as well. So that is, I think, one of the ways that we can move forward. In terms of the actual question about the perceptions from different leadership, the board versus staff versus members, I think we all have different lenses on what we need to do for diversity and inclusion and a welcoming environment. So I think there's always going to be that, different view of, how we are approaching things and how impactful our projects or our initiatives are being. But the most important thing to me, as I see it, is that, within your membership, who are those minorities? Like, let's say because of this call, we'll focus on Hispanics, but if it's just 1% of the Hispanic, if it's just 1% that is Hispanic in your membership, then reach out to them. What is your experience here? Dig in a little bit deeper, and maybe you can find out if there's any obstacles from increasing those numbers specifically for those minorities or the population that you want to focus on.
Thank you, Carlos and Jose. I will add, for that questions, one of the things the article indicated was that you saw that female association staff were less likely to report feeling included in their workplace compared to males. I think the percentage was 55% for females versus 77% for males. And I just have like a personal example of the inclusion portion. So I just started working at my organization in March, a week before we went completely remote. I am the only female in the group of 4 other white males for IT. So I'm a Latina, I am a female in tech. And how then do you onboard me to feel included in a brand new organization? And one of the small things that was done that I felt, I think was very purposeful from my director is that he gave me a voice. Very quickly, he earned that trust with me, and he gave me a voice at the table. And so if we were in a meeting with a different department or with a vendor, he made sure to include me in those decisions. Even if I didn't have anything to do, because I'm learning the systems and I don't know a lot, he made sure to give that message to others around the organization and vendors that we work with that, she's here and she's going to be a person that is going to have a voice in this department. And so that made me feel very included. So it's a small thing that I think leaders can do to make sure that you give that respect to the people that work with you, and make sure that, their voice matters. So I'll just say that. And then the article also noted that in order for organizations to make true change, they need to have a true desire to change, which leads me to the next question in the article. What challenges are associations facing in implementing action-oriented tactics to foster DE&I? When it comes to creating a welcoming environment in the workplace, 41% of participants cited finding qualified, diverse employees as a challenge. Other competing strategic priorities closely followed, with 36% of participants acknowledging it as a key challenge to fostering DE&I. Carlos, can you give us some initial thoughts and reactions on this?
Sure, thank you, Norma. For me, I would start with the why and then follow with the how. And so that larger context is why are we doing this? What is the broader thing that we're trying to tackle? Obviously, it's DE&I, but I think once you start with purpose, that gives more meaning to what we're actually doing. Another thing I think is, maybe the way that we're looking at this, we're not climbing a mountain initially, right? We're climbing small hills, and so that might seem daunting in terms of where do I take that first step. Start small. Start with a maybe a focus group. Start with a proof of concept. Build that out, and I think once you experience small gains and wins, I think that gives a little bit more a tangible feeling towards it. And again, it's not an insurmountable task. Another reason why I think folks are struggling with implementing action oriented tactics is, do they have buy-in from leadership? You could have a small group of the minority that have good intentions, but you can only go so far if you don't have that encouragement from your leadership, even from your direct supervisor. So, to everybody's point, you have to be intentional in terms of building that in your own environment. If you are privy to, creating strategic goals, that could be part of it. Build that out in your strategic goals. Again, start small, measure it, use that as a baseline, and compare it in terms of over that period of time that you're measuring. And I think once folks see that those successes in measurement and on paper, they will get that encouragement to say that we can make this happen. So assuming, again, you have that buy-in from leadership, and assuming you have those investment dollars, I would say form a small task force, committee, or a group within your own organization. It doesn't have to be all Latinos. It has to be people that have a passion to initiate change. And I think it starts from there. And I think that will resonate with most folks. Norma, back to you.
I'll turn it over to Josie. I think Josie had some thoughts on this.
Thank you, Norma and Carlos. So I kind of want to flip it a little bit because when you read the statement saying that, the response was that 41% of the people surveyed found it was challenging to find diverse employment. And we're all working in association management, and we're all diverse individuals. So I thought it was very interesting then, what does that speak to us for our professional development, So we're here, we're part of the need, we're part of the solution. So two things, how can you then support your organization with their diversity and and inclusion initiatives? What can you do to leverage your unique life experience and be part of the solution? So I think, speaking to building on what Carlos says, the ability to have maybe employee resource groups or focus groups, if your organization is a little bit smaller, being part of a focus group and just representing not just your own life experience, but others as well, and helping your association use you as a reference as an advisory group with another group of people. Then the other thing I want to focus on is where when you come into association management, obviously everyone wants to grow within their career. So what can you do and what should you be doing? Are you seeking out professional development opportunities so that you are in a position to grow when the opportunity arises? Oftentimes it's maybe perhaps not part of our culture to ask for things, or maybe we're more focused on just focusing on our work. But sometimes we have to break out of that and we have to seek professional development opportunities. We do provide a resource. We are providing a resource of some that are out there for people to look at. So kind of challenge yourself. If you're interested in something, ask for it. And if you're excited about the work that you're doing, share your excitement with your supervisors and your colleagues about the work that you're doing. Oftentimes, I think we're a little too quiet about our passion for the work that we have. And so we just have to be really comfortable with ourselves and what we feel about our work, and being able to share that with other people, and also having a desire to grow and ask for the support to grow. So those are just a few thoughts on that.
Thank you, Josie. I wanted to just say a little bit in regards to finding qualified, diverse employees. I've recently been put on a interview committee for my organization, and what HR really reminded us of is we tend to want to hire someone that reminds us of ourselves, right? Like, are they going to fit in? Are they going to get along? And it's like, if you like someone that you interview, ask yourself, why do you like yourself? Like, put a critically analyze, why do you like that person? Is it because they're like you, or is it because, if that's the case, then that's not going to diversify your employees, right? You think about what exactly that employee will bring outside of they're just like you. And I thought that was important because the organization that I'm currently in is pretty diverse. I think from the four associations that I've been a part of, I think it's the most diverse I've been a part of. And so I think them doing that from the very beginning, before you even start interviewing people, is important, because it makes us think while we're interviewing that you're going to look outside of just like, oh, I'm going to, this person seems good and I'm going to get along with them, right? Because then how else are you going to diversify your employees if you don't really kind of critically analyze that? And then the other thing is, I wish there were a way, because this might happen, where when you're looking through resumes that you don't see the person's name, right? Because sometimes there's like some implicit bias there where people might, look at a person and say they're female, they're Latina, they're Latino, and just then automatically see that resume in a different view. Versus, I don't see the name of the person, let me look at their qualifications, and then pick on who I'm going to bring in from that point. So I just, I thought I'd share that bit as well. Okay, moving on to the final question, which we're going to hear from everyone in the group to get their thoughts, is what DE&I topics, areas or initiatives are most important to association members and or staff, and where do we go from here? I'll start it off with Jose.
So I wanted to answer the question a little bit differently and just talk a little bit about my experience and how I ended up here, because I think similar programs may be useful for others as well. So one thing that, like in my introduction, was I started an association in 2000. And I was in the association world for a few years. And at the time, I honestly didn't see it as a career. I saw it as, this is a job. And it was going well. However, for some reason, someone saw something in me. And they, in 2007, nominated me to be a diversity scholar for the Association Forum. That was an old program. And I was like, what's Association Forum? And what is this whole thing? I had no idea that Association Forum existed. I had no idea that association management was a career. And it just opened a whole new world for me in terms of what I wanted to do in terms of my career goals. So I did go through that program, and it was one of the best experiences that I've had. So I think, what opportunities can we give, not just within the association forum realm, but in our own organizations, even networking as part of our work as professionals. If we see another Hispanic or Latino or Latinx person, say, do you know about association management? Do you know about association forum? Do you know about these programs? I think reaching out and being more active on that is important.
Jay, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, just to echo Jose's comment, I think it's important for us to know whether you self-identify as Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, or consider yourself an ally of these groups. We all have a responsibility to seek and or create opportunities to expand and grow individuals in underrepresented groups. Many of us have gotten to the positions that we are in because of a colleague, a friend, a mentor, a coach that has challenged us or provided encouragement or pushed us to move forward in times of need. I challenge each and every one of you or everyone in this call today to stand up and be the change you want to see. Take the time to sit on the sidelines is behind us. Be a mentor, a coach to those that are in need. Look for opportunities to challenge your organizations to be inclusive, get a seat at the table to represent the underrepresented groups, whether it is a group that you represent yourself or as an ally. Don't be afraid to speak up, share your perspectives, and let everyone know the value you and others bring to the table.
Thank you, Jay. Josie, do you want to go next?
Yes, thanks. So the article showed, I believe it said 54% of the members surveyed said that it was necessary to create additional opportunities for diversity. And then only 21% of members said that actual opportunities had been created or programs or tactics. So I think for me, that's the most important issue right now. And I think we also have a great opportunity. There is a renewed focus on diversity, equity and inclusion right now. So taking part and taking charge of the development of those programs, speaking about it, being an ally, looking for an ally. I totally agree with what Jay stated in terms of allyship and looking for those things and how you can do that within your organization to advance and to be a voice, right, for the representation that you're seeking. I think that's important. So going back to, again, advocacy groups or kind of a focus group or an employee resource group within your organization. And then the next thing is, how do we move forward with continuing to create welcoming environment spaces and also making them more of a key focus within organizations, within conferences, making them more of general session type events, you know, really kind of pushing the needle forward in that area. I also think is, you know, a good direction for us to go in, is what I'm most interested in.
Thank you, Josie. Carlos.
Thanks,
Let's
Norma.
get your thoughts.
You know, to me, I guess the biggest challenge that we face is recognizing that there's a problem. Folks are comfortable maintaining the status quo and I guess pretending that there is no problem, right? And we could go on 2 years, 3 years, 5 years and still be in the same place. You know, as Jay mentioned, now's not the time to sit on the sidelines. Now's the time to take some action. You know, we all have the commonality of a colleague, not necessarily a Hispanic or Latino, who gave us an opportunity. And so, yeah, I think we are responsible for giving that opportunity to somebody else. And you don't have to do it explicitly for Latinos, obviously, you know, in the age of DE&I. I mean, take a look around you. There's so many candidates, potential candidates to choose from. So I think part of that is, you know, going into that mentorship role in terms of teaching somebody maybe the ropes, the basics in terms of how you started your journey, things to look out for, advocate for them, give them the resources and the training, and you know, just overall leadership in terms of being that example that they can look up to. Not necessarily follow your own path. I think, you know, what would be great is they blaze their own trail alongside you. So, you know, I think that the biggest part, you know, that I want to impart on the audience today is Latinos, Hispanics, Latinx, Hispanos, whatever you want to call us. You know, we're all, I guess, come from the same vein. We are all ambitious we all want an opportunity. We want to contribute to your membership organizations. We want to add some flavor to your staff to bring a different perspective. And again, to encourage folks. So as a group, we came together and we built out Association Latinos. It's a small idea right now, but we could see that it's something that can grow into something large. So be sure to go to LinkedIn and check out Association Latinos. Again, the panelists on this call today are going to get together and we're going to take some action. We talk about, is there a diversity talent pool to choose from? And if there's not, we're going to create that. What can we do? I think we all have the individual resources to make that happen. Again, some of the things that we're saying, we take our own advice. We're going to start small, see some success out of it and continue to build upon it. But you're all advocates in your own organizations. And so, continue to advocate for those that don't have opportunities. And everybody here at some point probably stumbled into an association. Let's help other folks stumble to associations as well.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Josie and Jay and Jose. And I'll just wrap up my thoughts with saying, I know, sometimes I know the article talked about creating, your own DE&I group within the organization, and associations are different sizes, right? We have very small associations and very large ones. And so if you're like a smaller association where you're like, well, how am I going to create this DE&I group within staff, for example? Like you can create a committee within your, within your membership, but within staff, then make it a point to ensure that your staff are members of association forum, because then that opens up the world to individuals like us who could then be mentors, who can answer questions, who can help them advocate for themselves and grow. I was lucky enough because I had a cheerleader, someone who opened, and let me know about Association Forum, which is obviously a world that none of, I didn't know about. And everyone has kind of echoed the same thing. We all had that cheerleader who kind of said, join Association Forum, attend some SIG events, apply for ASAE DELP programs, anything that's going to open up the doors for us. And then as a Latino, I know sometimes, at least I grew up knowing or being told like work hard and, they'll recognize your hard work and you'll move up, and, don't question those in leadership because you just have to do your work, and, they'll thank you for that and recognize that work. And yes, they have, but I've also learned that I have to advocate for myself, right? And I have, I think, my friends would joke about me doing this presentation right now because 20 years ago, I would have never done this, but I've learned to kind of have that voice for myself and open up. And really, I think for associations, you have to think, especially leadership in associations, think about how you're preparing yourself to be to have a multiracial future. Because when you look, I was looking at some data for the Brookings Institution, and as of right now, the total US population, 19% of the population is Latinos, right? 13% is Black, 6% is Asian, and 60% is white. But the median age of these groups are, Latinos are the youngest. Our median age is 30 years old. Black is 35, Asians are 38, and whites are 44. To add to that, I even saw another statistic that stood out to me is that the percentage of those under the age of 16, 50% are white. So think about that in less than 10 years, those 15-year-olds are going to be 25, right? Half of which will be part of the workforce. And so 5 out of 10 will be white, but the other 5 will be of other multi-ethnic backgrounds, with 26% being Latino. So right now, under the age of 16, 26% of the population in the United States is of a Latino background, with the majority being able to speak English, because maybe that's a question that, you know, crossed your mind. So I just wanted to end on that note with those numbers. So thank you everyone for attending. I'll go ahead and open it up to questions now for the panel.
Okay, thank you today to our speakers. We have a few questions, so I'm going to go ahead and ask. From Benjamin, the question is, can you address the problems with using Latinx when speaking Spanish, please?
Yeah, I saw that on the chat and I wanted to address it. So I'm not sure what that was specifically asking, but I know that the whole thing about Spanish being a language that assigns gender to everything is also, you know, problematic. And aside from Latinx, there isn't really a way to address non-binary individuals via pronouns that, you know, there isn't like the they that the English language has. So Latinx is a way, but in Spanish, there isn't really a way. And I think, you know, in terms of the Spanish speaking countries and people that are wanting to move forward that, that initiative, I think they're still trying to figure out how to address people that are non-binary.
Okay, thank you, Jose. Another question is for those organizations that are asking the question and collecting the data. Are there best practices on how the questions is asked? We currently use the U.S. Census as the model for a demographic question around race and origin. Is this common?
I don't know if Josie or Jose or Jay, because I know that you're part of member organizations in regards to collecting demographic data. Do you have any input on that?
From my perspective, I will say that every time we talk to our data folks and we mention the GDRP and collecting this type of demographics, the one question that we get asked is, what is the business case for it? And if you have a business case for it and you are managing your data, then let's talk about how to make it into the initiative and make it work so that it follows all the guidelines. Again, I know I mentioned it before, but I am not an expert in this. I have somebody that is, so that I can run this type of questions by him, but I'll be glad to ask him more questions and follow up with a person. But unfortunately, I don't know the ins and out. I just know that the one thing that we are always asked is, what's the business case for it?
Okay.
And if I could just piggyback on that, my own organization, the NBCRNA, just recently started collecting that information. And our business case is we have a research committee that is looking at offering our credentialing exam, our national certification exam, in a different language. And so we want to see what that representation is among our nurse anesthetists. So that's something that our research committee is looking at. And as an organization, we do model our data collection and it aligns with how the U.S. Census data is also collected.
Okay, thank you both. Our next question is from Alexis. How can we ask for this data while also adhering to Gdpr best practices?
I don't know that we have any lawyers on there. Do any of you have any input on that? Because if not, I think the best question is to talk to the lawyers about that. The best answer.
I mean, I think
that.
if you start with just being transparent and of what you're doing with their data, that speaks to GDPR as well, in terms of right to privacy, right to have your data being mobile or the right to forget. I mean, it's just another data point. So if you do collect it, you have to think about, where am I storing this information? Who am I sharing it with? And come up with a plan in case that member asked for them to be forgotten, exactly where it's stored, archived, and so on and so forth, to be able to roll that back. So we can talk about some of the basics, but I think if you're talking about the legalities, obviously it would be wise to consult an attorney.
If I may add, I just want to ensure that if you're going to be asking for data, be intentional that you're going to be using it, just not be asking for information that's not going to be used, and be transparent in communicating to the membership how you're going to be using that data.
Okay.
Marilyn, I think we have room for maybe one or two more questions. Yeah.
Okay, let me go. I have some comments too. We'll get back to those at the end. Our next question is from Lynn. We struggle because first we need people to apply for jobs. We post jobs across the board in narrow platforms. Any suggestions on where to seek applicants?
I mean, if you're posting job postings on the same places and you're not getting any bites, you might want to rethink where you're posting that on. So there are professional organizations, as we alluded to, that you may lean on to get that word out, and just to bring those potential candidates to wherever you're posting. So that could be an option as well. But be intentional with where you're posting, be deliberate, and make sure you're posting where you have maybe a wider audience, and word of mouth too.
One organization that I can think of off the top of my mind that is that we're going to have as part of the resources is ASE, which is the Hispanic Alliance of Career Enhancement. They are Chicago based, and they do focus on career development for Latinos. So I would look into that organization.
And one other thing is, like, if you're not getting the applicants that you're looking for, trying to be a little bit more out of the box, if you will, because there are Latino groups in LinkedIn, there are Latino groups in Facebook and other social media, Twitter. So just, as an HR, you can add to be part of those groups and share your job description there and see if that attracts more interest.
Right. So I think we're close to time. So I think we're, any other questions that come in, I think Association Forum can send them over and we can answer them and get back to all of you. We'll make sure. I think I saw a question about how else we can get involved. Aside from Association Latinos, and we're happy to share our contact information with Association Forum so that they we share it with the attendees, anyone who's interested in reaching out to us, any Latinos, any allies. So with that, I'm going to just do a quick closure and say thank you to all of you for joining us today. I'd also like to thank the panel who, without a second thought, agreed to do this and put this together. So thank you all for agreeing to be panelists. And I'd also like, I think we would also like to thank Association Forum for giving us this opportunity to share the Latinx perspective. We were all very enthusiastic to participate, and we definitely want to build on this momentum. We look forward to providing more opportunities to network and share content with the Latinx community and the allies of Association Forum.